Question 1. The audit findings indicate a newly identified risk related to data integrity within a specific reporting module that, while not currently causing significant issues, has the potential to impact downstream analytical processes if left unaddressed. What is the most appropriate next step for the risk management team? Option A. Immediately implement comprehensive new controls for the reporting module to proactively mitigate any potential future issues. Option B. Document the risk and delegate its full management and resolution to the junior analyst responsible for the reporting module. Option C. Conduct a detailed assessment of the risk, including its potential impact, likelihood, and existing controls, and establish a plan for ongoing monitoring and periodic reevaluation. Option D. Classify the risk as low priority and defer any further action until a more significant issue arises. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed assessment of the risk, including its potential impact, likelihood, and existing controls, and establish a plan for ongoing monitoring and periodic reevaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment where a newly identified risk, while not immediately critical, has the potential for significant future impact. The professional must balance the immediate resource constraints with the long-term implications of the risk. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of immediate action versus ongoing monitoring, considering the organization's risk appetite and the potential for the risk to escalate. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented assessment of the newly identified risk. This includes understanding its potential impact, likelihood, and existing controls. Based on this assessment, a plan for ongoing monitoring and periodic reevaluation should be established. This aligns with best practices in risk management, which emphasize a proactive and systematic approach. Regulatory frameworks, while not explicitly detailed here due to the exam's focus on IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2, generally mandate that organizations have robust risk management processes. This approach ensures that emerging risks are not overlooked and are managed according to their evolving threat level, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to maintaining an effective control environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the risk entirely is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential future harm to the organization or its stakeholders. This could lead to breaches of internal policies and potentially external regulations if the risk materializes and causes damage. Implementing immediate, extensive controls without a proper assessment is also problematic. This approach can lead to inefficient allocation of resources, potentially diverting attention and budget from more pressing risks. It may also introduce new, unforeseen risks or operational disruptions. From a professional standpoint, it lacks the analytical rigor expected in risk management. Delegating the entire responsibility to a junior team member without adequate oversight or guidance is another failure. While delegation can be effective, it must be accompanied by clear objectives, appropriate authority, and sufficient support. Without this, the risk may not be adequately understood or managed, and the organization could be exposed. This also fails to uphold professional standards of accountability and competence. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should follow a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge and document the identified risk. Second, conduct a preliminary assessment to understand its nature and potential impact. Third, consult relevant internal policies and risk appetite statements. Fourth, determine the appropriate level of response, which may range from immediate action to ongoing monitoring. Fifth, document the decision and the rationale behind it, including any mitigation plans or monitoring strategies. Finally, ensure that the risk is reviewed periodically and that the response is adjusted as necessary. This systematic approach ensures that risks are managed effectively and in accordance with organizational objectives and professional standards. Question 2. System analysis indicates that a marketing team needs to gather feedback on a new product feature from a large, geographically dispersed customer base. The team has limited time and resources for data collection. Which sampling approach would best ensure that the collected feedback is representative of the entire customer base, thereby supporting accurate product development decisions? Option A. Asking customer service representatives to identify and recruit participants they believe would provide useful feedback. Option B. Surveying customers who are most easily accessible through online channels and social media platforms. Option C. randomly selecting customers from a complete customer database, ensuring each customer has an equal probability of being chosen. Option D. Selecting customers who are known to be early adopters and vocal advocates for the product. The correct answer is C. Randomly selecting customers from a complete customer database, ensuring each customer has an equal probability of being chosen. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in data analysis due to the inherent biases that can be introduced when selecting a sample. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen sample accurately reflects the characteristics of the larger population from which it is drawn, thereby allowing for valid generalizations. Failure to do so can lead to flawed conclusions and potentially misguided business decisions. Careful judgment is required to select a method that minimizes bias and maximizes representativeness. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the principles of statistical sampling designed to achieve unbiased representation. Employing a method that gives every member of the population an equal chance of selection, it minimizes systematic error and increases the likelihood that the sample statistics will accurately estimate population parameters. This aligns with the ethical obligation to conduct research and analysis with integrity and rigor, ensuring that findings are reliable and defensible. An incorrect approach that relies on convenience sampling fails because it introduces selection bias. This method favors individuals who are easily accessible, leading to a sample that is unlikely to be representative of the broader population. For example, surveying only readily available employees might exclude those working remotely or in different departments, skewing the results. This is a regulatory and ethical failure, as it compromises the validity of the analysis and can lead to decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information, violating principles of due diligence and responsible data handling. Another incorrect approach, purposive sampling, while sometimes useful for specific qualitative research, is inappropriate here because it involves subjective selection based on the researcher's judgment. This introduces researcher bias and does not guarantee that all segments of the population are adequately represented. Ethically, this can be problematic if the researcher's preconceived notions influence the sample selection, leading to a confirmation bias in the results. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the research objectives and the characteristics of the target population. The analyst must then evaluate different sampling methodologies based on their ability to achieve representativeness and minimize bias. This involves considering the resources available, the time constraints, and the potential for introducing error. A systematic approach, often involving consultation with statistical experts or reviewing established best practices, is crucial to selecting the most appropriate and defensible sampling strategy. Question 3. Consider a scenario where a marketing team needs to analyze customer purchasing patterns to identify popular product combinations for a new promotional campaign. The available data includes customer names, purchase histories, and demographic information. The team is eager to leverage this data to maximize campaign effectiveness. What is the most appropriate and compliant method for the marketing team to proceed with their analysis? Option A. Retain all customer data indefinitely, even after the promotional campaign analysis is complete, to potentially use for future, unspecified marketing efforts. Option B. Directly analyze the raw customer data, including names and specific purchase histories, to pinpoint exact customer segments for targeted offers. Option C. Anonymize and aggregate the customer data to identify trends in product combinations without revealing individual customer identities. Option D. Share the raw customer data with a third-party analytics firm without obtaining explicit consent from the customers. The correct answer is C. Anonymize and aggregate the customer data to identify trends in product combinations without revealing individual customer identities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves managing sensitive client data within the strict confines of data privacy regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for data analysis to inform business decisions with the imperative to protect individual privacy and comply with legal obligations. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that data handling practices are both effective and lawful, avoiding any actions that could lead to breaches of trust or regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data anonymization and aggregation before analysis. This aligns directly with the principles of data protection, such as data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to regulations like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, or similar frameworks governing data privacy in the relevant jurisdiction. By anonymizing data, the risk of identifying individuals is significantly reduced, thereby protecting their privacy. Aggregating data further obscures individual details, ensuring that insights are derived from trends rather than personal information. This method allows for valuable business insights to be gained without compromising the confidentiality and integrity of client data, thereby upholding ethical standards and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly analyzing raw client data without any form of anonymization or aggregation. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it exposes identifiable personal information to potential misuse or unauthorized access. Such a practice directly contravenes data protection laws that mandate the protection of personal data and require appropriate technical and organizational measures to prevent breaches. It also violates ethical principles of client confidentiality and trust. Another incorrect approach is to share raw client data with external parties without explicit consent or a legitimate legal basis. This constitutes a severe breach of data privacy regulations and ethical obligations. Sharing data without proper safeguards or authorization can lead to identity theft, discrimination, or other harms to individuals, and can result in substantial fines and reputational damage for the organization. A third incorrect approach is to retain client data indefinitely after its initial purpose has been fulfilled. Data protection regulations typically require data to be kept only for as long as necessary for the purpose for which it was collected. Indefinite retention increases the risk of data breaches and unauthorized access over time, and it is a violation of the principle of storage limitation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to data handling. This involves understanding the nature of the data, the potential risks associated with its processing, and the applicable regulatory requirements. Before undertaking any data analysis, professionals should consult relevant data protection policies and legal counsel to ensure compliance. The decision-making process should always involve a thorough assessment of privacy implications, prioritizing the protection of individuals' rights and adhering to the principles of lawful, fair, and transparent data processing. When in doubt, seeking clarification or opting for more stringent privacy-preserving measures is always the more responsible course of action. Question 4. The investigation demonstrates that an analyst has identified a new statistical technique that appears promising for analyzing a large dataset for an upcoming critical report. The analyst is eager to use this new technique to provide potentially more insightful results, but is aware of the tight deadline for the report. What is the most professionally responsible approach to incorporating this new technique into the analysis? Option A. Conduct a pilot study using a subset of the data to validate the suitability and assumptions of the new statistical technique before applying it to the entire dataset. Option B. Select a technique based on its advanced nature and potential to impress stakeholders, regardless of its direct applicability to the specific data characteristics. Option C. Immediately apply the new statistical technique to the full dataset to ensure the report is delivered on time, assuming the software's default settings are appropriate. Option D. Rely on the statistical software's recommendation for the most complex technique available, as this is likely to yield the most sophisticated and accurate results. The correct answer is A. Conduct a pilot study using a subset of the data to validate the suitability and assumptions of the new statistical technique before applying it to the entire dataset. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the analyst to balance the need for timely reporting with the imperative of data integrity and adherence to established analytical best practices. The pressure to deliver results quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the validity of the findings, potentially leading to flawed business decisions. The analyst must exercise sound judgment to ensure the chosen approach is both efficient and robust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the systematic and documented evaluation of analytical methods before their application in a live reporting scenario. This aligns with the principles of good data governance and analytical rigor, which are implicitly expected in professional settings, even if not explicitly codified in a single regulation for this exam. By performing a pilot study and validating the chosen method, the analyst ensures that the statistical assumptions are met, the method is appropriate for the data characteristics, and the results are reliable and reproducible. This proactive validation minimizes the risk of introducing errors or biases into the final report, thereby upholding the credibility of the analysis and the analyst. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately applying the new statistical technique to the full dataset without prior validation. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses essential quality control steps. It risks generating misleading results due to unverified assumptions or inappropriate application of the technique, which could lead to noncompliance with internal data quality standards or external reporting requirements if the findings are used for decision-making. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the principles of sound statistical practice. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the default settings of the statistical software, without understanding the underlying assumptions or the implications of those settings for the specific dataset. This is professionally unacceptable as it abdicates responsibility for the analytical process. It fails to meet the ethical obligation to ensure the analysis is appropriate and valid. If the default settings are not suitable, the results will be flawed, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions and subsequent breaches of professional conduct by misrepresenting data. A further incorrect approach is to select a technique based on its perceived complexity or novelty, rather than its suitability for the research question and data. This is a failure of analytical judgment and can lead to misapplication of statistical methods. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the core principles of statistical analysis and can result in findings that are statistically unsound and ethically questionable, as they do not accurately reflect the data. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that emphasizes a phased approach to analysis. This begins with clearly defining the research question and understanding the data characteristics. Next, potential analytical methods should be identified and evaluated against the research question and data. Crucially, before full-scale application, a pilot study or validation phase should be conducted to confirm the suitability and robustness of the chosen method. This includes checking assumptions, assessing performance, and documenting the process. Finally, the validated method is applied, and the results are interpreted with an understanding of the method's limitations. This systematic process ensures both efficiency and analytical integrity, minimizing the risk of errors and upholding professional standards. Question 5. Upon reviewing a dataset containing personally identifiable information, PI, intended for analysis in IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2, which method best ensures compliance with data protection regulations while enabling statistical analysis? Option A. Conducting analysis directly on the raw, unanonymized dataset without any protective measures within SPSS statistics. Option B. Utilizing SPSS statistics built-in data masking or pseudonymization features before conducting analysis. Option C. Sharing the raw dataset with colleagues via unsecured email for collaborative analysis. Option D. Exporting the dataset to a plain text file and performing analysis using external, unverified tools. The correct answer is B. Utilizing SPSS statistics built-in data masking or pseudonymization features before conducting analysis. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient data analysis with the imperative of maintaining data integrity and adhering to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security as outlined by relevant data protection laws. The professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure that the chosen method for handling sensitive data in SPSS statistics does not inadvertently expose it or violate established protocols. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data security and compliance by utilizing the built-in, secure features of SPSS statistics designed for handling sensitive information. This method ensures that data is protected throughout the analysis process, aligning with regulatory requirements for data minimization, purpose limitation, and appropriate technical and organizational measures to safeguard personal data. By employing these secure functionalities, the professional demonstrates a commitment to ethical data handling and regulatory adherence, thereby mitigating risks of data breaches and associated penalties. An incorrect approach that involves exporting sensitive data to less secure formats or platforms for analysis fails to uphold the necessary security standards. This action constitutes a regulatory failure by potentially violating data protection principles that mandate the protection of personal data from unauthorized access or disclosure. Furthermore, it represents an ethical failure as it disregards the responsibility to protect individuals' privacy. Another incorrect approach, such as performing analysis directly on raw, unanonymized data without employing any protective measures within SPSS statistics, also poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This can lead to accidental disclosure of personally identifiable information, violating the principle of data minimization and potentially leading to breaches of confidentiality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the data's sensitivity, the applicable regulatory framework, and the capabilities of the analytical software. Professionals should always first explore the secure, compliant functionalities offered by their tools. If such functionalities are insufficient, they must seek alternative, equally secure methods or consult with data protection officers or legal counsel before proceeding. A risk-based approach, prioritizing data protection and compliance at every step, is paramount. Question 6. Compliance review shows that a client has requested a specific statistical test in IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2, believing it will directly answer their business question. However, your professional assessment indicates that this test is inappropriate for the data structure and the nature of the question being asked, and a different approach would yield more reliable and actionable insights. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Explain to the client why the requested statistical test is inappropriate for their data and business question, detailing the limitations and potential for misleading results, and propose a more suitable alternative analysis that will better address their objective. Option B. Refuse to perform the requested statistical test and inform the client that you cannot proceed without providing any further explanation or alternative. Option C. Perform the requested statistical test as instructed by the client and present the results without comment, assuming the client understands the implications of their chosen method. Option D. Conduct the requested statistical test and then perform a secondary, more appropriate analysis, presenting both without clearly differentiating the validity or reliability of each. Correct answer is A. Explain to the client why the requested statistical test is inappropriate for their data and business question, detailing the limitations and potential for misleading results, and propose a more suitable alternative analysis that will better address their objective. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's explicit, albeit potentially misguided, request and the professional's ethical obligation to provide sound, evidence-based advice. The challenge lies in navigating the client relationship while upholding professional integrity and adhering to regulatory expectations regarding the responsible use of statistical software and data analysis. The professional must exercise careful judgment to balance client satisfaction with the imperative to avoid misleading or inappropriate analyses. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the analysis and the client's long-term understanding over immediate, potentially superficial client satisfaction. By explaining the limitations of the requested analysis and offering a more robust, statistically sound alternative, the professional demonstrates adherence to ethical guidelines that mandate competence and diligence. This approach aligns with the principle of providing advice that is not only responsive to the client's stated needs, but also technically accurate and defensible, thereby preventing the generation of potentially misleading or unreliable insights. This upholds the professional's duty to act in the client's best interest, which includes protecting them from the consequences of flawed analysis. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves blindly fulfilling the client's request without critical evaluation. This fails to meet the professional's duty of care and competence. It risks generating outputs that are statistically invalid, leading to poor business decisions for the client and potentially damaging the professional's reputation. This approach could be seen as a failure to exercise professional judgment, a core tenet of ethical conduct. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without offering any explanation or alternative. This demonstrates poor communication and client management skills, potentially alienating the client and failing to educate them on best practices. While it avoids producing a flawed analysis, it does so at the expense of a constructive professional relationship and the opportunity to guide the client towards better analytical practices. A further incorrect approach might be to perform the requested analysis, but then present it without any caveats or discussion of its limitations. This is ethically problematic as it implicitly endorses a flawed methodology and can lead the client to place undue confidence in unreliable results. This constitutes a failure to be transparent and to ensure the client understands the context and limitations of the data and the analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's underlying objective. Once the objective is clear, the professional should assess the feasibility and appropriateness of the requested methodology. If the requested method is flawed, the professional should clearly articulate the reasons why, referencing statistical principles and potential negative consequences. Subsequently, the professional should propose and explain a more appropriate alternative that better serves the client's objective. This iterative process of understanding, evaluating, communicating, and proposing ensures that the client's needs are met in a manner that upholds professional standards and ethical obligations. Question 7. Examination of the data shows a consistent, albeit small, decline in customer engagement metrics over the past 3 reporting periods. While the trend is not yet alarming, it warrants careful consideration. Which of the following actions best reflects a professional and statistically sound approach to understanding this observed trend within the context of the C2020-011 IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2 framework? Option A. Ignore the trend for now, as the decline is small and could be attributed to random fluctuations in the data, and focus on other, more significant performance indicators. Option B. Conduct a series of descriptive statistical analyses in SPSS to summarize the engagement metrics for each period, including measures of central tendency and dispersion, and then perform an appropriate inferential statistical test, e.g., a trend analysis or comparison of means across periods, to determine if the decline is statistically significant. Option C. Immediately initiate a broad customer survey to gather qualitative feedback, assuming the decline is due to dissatisfaction, and allocate budget for a new customer retention program. Option D. Consult with external data science experts to explore advanced predictive modeling techniques to forecast future engagement, as the current tools may not be sufficient. Correct answer is B. Conduct a series of descriptive statistical analyses in SPSS to summarize the engagement metrics for each period, including measures of central tendency and dispersion, and then perform an appropriate inferential statistical test, e.g., a trend analysis or comparison of means across periods, to determine if the decline is statistically significant. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data analysis where preliminary findings suggest a potential issue, but the immediate temptation is to jump to conclusions or implement drastic measures without thorough validation. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of addressing a potential problem with the need for rigorous, evidence-based decision-making. Misinterpreting or overreacting to initial data can lead to wasted resources, incorrect strategic shifts, and a loss of credibility. The requirement to adhere strictly to the C2020-011 IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2 framework means that any proposed actions must be grounded in the principles and capabilities taught within that specific curriculum, avoiding assumptions or external methodologies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation using the tools and techniques appropriate for Level 1 of IBM SPSS statistics. This means employing descriptive statistics to understand the distribution and central tendencies of the data, followed by inferential statistics to test hypotheses and determine if the observed patterns are statistically significant or likely due to random chance. For instance, if the data suggests a decline in a key metric, the correct approach would be to use SPSS to calculate measures of central tendency, mean, median, dispersion, standard deviation, range, and potentially conduct a t-test or ANOVA to compare different groups or time periods. This aligns with the foundational statistical concepts covered in the C2020-011 syllabus emphasizing empirical evidence over anecdotal observation. The professional practice here is to let the data, analyzed through appropriate statistical methods, guide the interpretation and subsequent actions, ensuring that any conclusions are robust and defensible. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately implement a new marketing campaign based solely on the initial observation of a downward trend. This fails to consider the possibility that the trend is temporary, within normal statistical variation, or influenced by external factors not yet accounted for. Ethically and professionally, this is unsound as it expends resources without a confirmed problem, potentially leading to a worse outcome if the underlying cause is different. It bypasses the rigorous analysis expected in a data-driven environment. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the observed trend entirely without further investigation, assuming it's a data anomaly. This is professionally negligent as it ignores potentially critical information that could impact business performance. It fails to uphold the principle of thorough data exploration and analysis, which is central to the C2020-011 curriculum. A third incorrect approach might involve seeking external, advanced statistical techniques not covered in the C2020-011 syllabus to explain the trend. While these techniques might be valid in other contexts, they fall outside the defined jurisdiction of this exam. Professionally, it demonstrates a lack of confidence in the learned tools and a failure to apply the knowledge within the specified framework, potentially leading to misapplication or misinterpretation of results. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should first pause and resist the urge for immediate action. The decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly defining the observed phenomenon in the data. 2. Formulating specific, testable hypotheses about the phenomenon. 3. Selecting appropriate statistical methods within the C2020-011 IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2 framework to test these hypotheses. 4. Conducting the analysis rigorously, interpreting the results in the context of statistical significance and practical implications. 5. Based on the validated findings, developing a reasoned course of action, which may include further investigation, intervention, or no action if the phenomenon is deemed insignificant. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and the specific knowledge base of the examination. Question 8. Performance analysis shows a recurring pattern of unexpected fluctuations in a key performance indicator that deviates significantly from historical trends. The analyst has observed this anomaly across multiple reporting periods. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the analyst? Option A. Assume the anomaly is a minor data entry error and attempt to adjust the data to align with expected trends. Option B. Ignore the anomaly, as it may resolve itself in subsequent reporting periods. Option C. Immediately report the anomaly to senior management, highlighting the potential severity of the deviation without conducting any preliminary investigation. Option D. Initiate a detailed, multi-stage investigation process, starting with a preliminary review to confirm the anomaly's characteristics and context, followed by consultation with relevant subject matter experts and review of data validation procedures. The correct answer is D. Initiate a detailed, multi-stage investigation process, starting with a preliminary review to confirm the anomaly's characteristics and context, followed by consultation with relevant subject matter experts and review of data validation procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a data analyst, having identified a potential anomaly in performance data, must decide on the appropriate course of action. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the potential for misinterpretation or premature conclusions. The analyst must consider the implications of their actions on stakeholders, the integrity of the data, and the potential for unnecessary alarm or resource misallocation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any investigation is systematic, evidence-based, and aligned with established protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a structured, multi-stage investigation process. This begins with a preliminary review to confirm the anomaly's existence and gather initial context. If the anomaly persists, the next step is to consult with relevant subject matter experts and review established data validation procedures. This collaborative and procedural approach ensures that the investigation is not conducted in isolation, leverages existing knowledge, and adheres to best practices for data integrity. It also provides a framework for documenting findings and justifying subsequent actions, which is crucial for accountability and transparency. This aligns with professional standards that emphasize diligence, collaboration, and adherence to established processes when dealing with data discrepancies. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately escalate the anomaly to senior management without any preliminary investigation or consultation. This represents a failure in professional diligence and can lead to unnecessary panic or misallocation of senior management's time and resources. It bypasses essential steps of data validation and expert consultation, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions being drawn and communicated. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of responsibility in thoroughly assessing a situation before involving higher authorities. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the anomaly as a minor data entry error without further investigation. This is professionally unsound as it assumes a cause without evidence. Data anomalies, even if seemingly minor, can sometimes indicate systemic issues or significant trends. Failing to investigate thoroughly could lead to overlooking critical problems, thereby compromising the reliability of future analyses and decision-making based on that data. This approach demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a failure to uphold the principle of data integrity. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to correct the data anomaly based on assumptions without understanding its root cause or consulting with relevant parties. This is a direct violation of data integrity principles. Tampering with data, even with good intentions, can distort the true picture, lead to flawed analyses, and erode trust in the data and the analyst. It bypasses the necessary steps of understanding, documenting, and validating any proposed corrections, which are fundamental to professional data handling. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing data anomalies should employ a systematic decision-making framework. This framework typically involves 1. Observation and initial assessment. Clearly identify and document the observed anomaly. 2. Contextualization. Gather relevant background information and understand the data's source and purpose. 3. Preliminary investigation. Conduct initial checks to confirm the anomaly and identify potential immediate causes. 4. Consultation and collaboration. Engage with subject matter experts, data owners, or colleagues to gain insights and validate findings. 5. Procedural adherence. Review and apply established data validation and anomaly resolution protocols. 6. Documentation. Maintain a clear record of all steps taken, findings, and decisions. 7. Escalation if necessary. Based on the investigation, determine if further escalation to management or other stakeholders is warranted, providing a well-supported rationale. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and uphold professional standards of accuracy, integrity, and accountability. Question 9. Operational review demonstrates that the firm's current process for identifying and evaluating operational risks lacks sufficient depth, leading to potential underestimation of certain risk exposures. Which of the following actions would best address this identified weakness in a manner consistent with robust risk management principles and regulatory expectations? Option A. Immediately procure and implement a new, advanced risk management software system to automate the risk assessment process and enhance data capture. Option B. Engage an external risk management consultancy to perform a complete overhaul of the firm's risk assessment procedures, assuming their expertise will provide a superior solution. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review and update of the firm's operational risk assessment framework, incorporating input from frontline staff and subject matter experts to refine risk identification criteria and evaluation methodologies. Option D. Focus solely on updating the existing risk register with new information and assigning higher scores to risks that appear to be increasing, without altering the underlying assessment methodology. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review and update of the firm's operational risk assessment framework, incorporating input from frontline staff and subject matter experts to refine risk identification criteria and evaluation methodologies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the operational review has identified a potential weakness in the risk assessment process, specifically concerning the identification and evaluation of operational risks. The firm must ensure its risk assessment framework is robust, compliant with relevant regulations, and effectively mitigates potential harm to clients and the firm itself. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate method to address this identified weakness, balancing efficiency with thoroughness and regulatory adherence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified gap by enhancing the existing risk assessment methodology. This involves a systematic review and update of the risk assessment framework, incorporating feedback from operational staff who have direct experience with the risks. This proactive and structured method ensures that the risk assessment process is comprehensive, up-to-date, and aligned with regulatory expectations for operational risk management. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and robust internal controls, which are fundamental to maintaining client trust and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves solely relying on external consultants without internal validation fails to leverage internal expertise and may lead to a generic solution not tailored to the firm's specific operational context. This could result in a risk assessment that is either overly broad or misses critical nuances, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance if it doesn't adequately address the firm's unique risk profile. Another incorrect approach, which is to implement a new, complex risk assessment software without first understanding the root cause of the identified weakness, is inefficient and potentially costly. It risks addressing a symptom rather than the underlying problem and may not integrate effectively with existing processes, leading to user resistance and incomplete risk identification. This approach neglects the foundational need to understand and improve the process itself before layering on technology. A further incorrect approach, focusing only on updating the risk register without re-evaluating the assessment methodology, is insufficient. The risk register is a record of identified risks. If the methodology for identifying and assessing those risks is flawed, the register will not accurately reflect the firm's true risk exposure. This superficial fix fails to address the systemic issue highlighted by the operational review and could lead to a false sense of security. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the identified issue, a review of the firm's existing policies and procedures against regulatory requirements, and an assessment of potential solutions based on their effectiveness, efficiency, and compliance impact. Professionals should prioritize approaches that involve internal expertise, data-driven analysis, and a systematic, iterative process for improvement, ensuring that any changes are well justified and effectively implemented. Question 10. Analysis of the most appropriate statistical procedure for determining if there is a significant difference in average scores between two independent groups of participants on a continuous outcome variable, assuming the data within each group is approximately normally distributed and the variances of the two groups are roughly equal. Option A, a chi-square test for independence. Option B, an independent samples t-test. Option C, a one-way ANOVA. Option D, a paired samples t-test. The correct answer is B, an independent samples t-test. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data analysis where a researcher must select the most appropriate statistical procedure to answer a specific research question. The challenge lies in understanding the underlying assumptions of different statistical tests and how they align with the characteristics of the data and the research objective. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to invalid conclusions, undermining the credibility of the research and potentially leading to flawed decision-making based on that research. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves selecting a statistical test whose assumptions are met by the data and which is designed to answer the specific research question. For comparing means of two independent groups, an independent samples t-test is the appropriate choice when the data is continuous, approximately normally distributed within each group, and the variances of the two groups are roughly equal, homogeneity of variance. This test directly addresses the research question of whether there is a statistically significant difference between the means of two independent populations. Adhering to these assumptions ensures the validity and reliability of the statistical inference. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing a paired samples t-test would be incorrect because this test is designed for situations where the same subjects are measured twice, e.g., before and after an intervention, or when subjects are matched in pairs. Applying it to independent groups violates the independence assumption, leading to an inflated risk of type I error. Selecting a chi-square test for independence would be incorrect because this test is used for analyzing categorical data to determine if there is an association between two categorical variables. It is not suitable for comparing means of continuous data. Opting for one way ANOVA would be incorrect if there are only two groups being compared. While ANOVA can be used for two groups, it is generally more appropriate and efficient for comparing means of three or more independent groups. For two groups, the independent samples t-test is the more direct and conventional choice, and using ANOVA in this context might be considered an overcomplication or a less precise application of statistical principles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach data analysis by first clearly defining the research question. Then they must examine the nature of their data, e.g., continuous, categorical, ordinal, and assess whether the assumptions of potential statistical tests are met. This involves understanding the theoretical underpinnings of each test and its limitations. When faced with multiple potential tests, the decision should be guided by which test most directly and validly addresses the research question, while respecting the data's characteristics and the test's assumptions. Consulting statistical resources or seeking guidance from experienced statisticians is also a crucial part of the professional decision-making process when uncertainty exists. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of the potential consequences of data analysis activities. When preparing a dataset for analysis using IBM SPSS statistics, what is the most critical step to ensure responsible data handling and compliance with privacy principles? Option A. Proceeding directly with data cleaning and transformation without any prior risk evaluation. Option B. Prioritizing the speed of data analysis over any detailed privacy considerations. Option C. Relying on the inherent security features of IBM SPSS statistics to protect sensitive information. Option D. Conducting a specific impact assessment to evaluate the risk of individual re-identification within the dataset. The correct answer is D. Conducting a specific impact assessment to evaluate the risk of individual re-identification within the dataset. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient data analysis with the ethical and regulatory imperative to protect sensitive information. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of data anonymization or aggregation to prevent re-identification while still retaining sufficient analytical value. Misjudging this balance can lead to regulatory breaches, loss of trust, and compromised data integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with data protection principles and the specific requirements of the IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1v2 framework, which implicitly emphasizes responsible data handling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that specifically evaluates the potential for re-identification of individuals within the dataset. This aligns with best professional practice by proactively identifying and mitigating risks associated with sensitive data. By focusing on the potential for re-identification, the assessment directly addresses the core ethical and regulatory concerns of data privacy. This approach ensures that any data manipulation or analysis performed using IBM SPSS statistics is conducted in a manner that respects individual privacy and adheres to the spirit of data protection regulations, even if not explicitly detailed in the Level 1 syllabus, as responsible data handling is a foundational principle. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with analysis without any specific assessment of re-identification risk. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it demonstrates a disregard for data privacy principles. It assumes that simply using statistical software like IBM SPSS statistics inherently protects data, which is a dangerous misconception. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on general data anonymization techniques without a targeted impact assessment for the specific dataset and analytical goals. This can lead to over-anonymization, rendering the data useless, or under-anonymization, leaving individuals vulnerable to re-identification. A further incorrect approach is to prioritize the speed of analysis over data privacy considerations. This is a direct ethical failure, as it places expediency above the fundamental right to privacy and can lead to severe regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to data handling. This involves understanding the nature of the data, the intended analysis, and the potential consequences of data breaches or re-identification. For commencing any analysis, particularly with sensitive data, a formal impact assessment should be conducted. This assessment should identify potential risks evaluate their likelihood and impact, and define mitigation strategies. When using statistical software like IBM SPSS statistics, professionals must remember that the tool itself does not guarantee data protection. It is the user's responsibility to implement appropriate safeguards. This decision-making process should always prioritize compliance with relevant data protection laws and ethical guidelines, ensuring that the analytical objectives are met without compromising individual privacy. Question 12. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to highlight the successful aspects of a recent project's performance metrics, suggesting that the final report should primarily focus on the positive outcomes observed in the data. As an analyst using IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1, how should you approach the presentation of your finding to balance stakeholder expectations with the integrity of your analysis? Option A. Present a comprehensive report that includes all relevant findings, both positive and negative, using clear and objective visualizations and narrative to provide a balanced perspective, while also offering to discuss specific areas of success in more detail. Option B. Create visualizations that exaggerate the positive trends and minimize the visual impact of any less favorable results, while ensuring the underlying numbers are technically correct. Option C. Refuse to incorporate any stakeholder feedback and present the raw statistical outputs without any contextualization or explanation, as this is the most objective approach. Option D. Modify the data analysis to exclude any metrics that did not meet expectations and focus solely on presenting the positive results to satisfy the stakeholders' request. The correct answer is A. Present a comprehensive report that includes all relevant findings, both positive and negative, using clear and objective visualizations and narrative to provide a balanced perspective, while also offering to discuss specific areas of success in more detail. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the desire to present findings in a clear and impactful manner and the ethical obligation to accurately represent the data, even when it might be less favorable. The stakeholders' request to emphasize the positive outcomes introduces a risk of bias and misrepresentation, which can undermine the credibility of the analysis and potentially lead to flawed decision-making. Careful judgment is required to balance stakeholder expectations with the principles of objective reporting. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves acknowledging the stakeholder's request while firmly adhering to the principles of unbiased data presentation. This means presenting all relevant findings, both positive and negative, in a balanced and objective manner. The emphasis should be on providing a comprehensive and accurate picture of the situation, allowing stakeholders to make informed decisions based on the full scope of the data. This aligns with professional ethical standards that mandate honesty, integrity, and objectivity in reporting. In the context of IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1, this translates to using the software's capabilities to generate accurate descriptive statistics and visualizations that reflect the complete dataset, rather than selectively highlighting favorable results. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to directly alter the analysis or presentation to exclusively focus on positive outcomes, ignoring or downplaying negative findings. This constitutes a direct violation of professional ethics, specifically the principles of honesty and integrity. It misleads stakeholders and can lead to poor strategic decisions based on incomplete or biased information. Such an action could also have regulatory implications if the reporting is used for compliance or public disclosure purposes, potentially leading to sanctions for misrepresentation. Another incorrect approach would be to present the data in a way that is technically accurate but misleading through selective visualization or narrative framing. For example, using charts with manipulated axes or focusing solely on a subset of the data that shows positive trends, while omitting other relevant data points. This, while perhaps not overtly falsifying data, still represents a breach of ethical conduct by creating a distorted perception of reality. It undermines the trust placed in the analyst and the integrity of the analytical process. A third incorrect approach might be to refuse to engage with the stakeholders' feedback at all, simply presenting the data as is without any attempt to address their concerns or explain the analytical process. While this avoids bias, it fails to acknowledge the stakeholders' role and can lead to a breakdown in communication and trust. Professional practice requires effective communication and the ability to explain analytical choices and their implications, even when those choices are not what the stakeholder initially desired. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity, objectivity, and transparency. When faced with requests that could compromise these principles, the first step is to understand the stakeholder's underlying objective. This involves open communication to clarify their concerns and the desired outcomes. Subsequently, the professional should explain the analytical process and the importance of presenting a complete and unbiased picture. If the stakeholder's request involves a legitimate need for emphasis on certain aspects, this can be addressed through careful framing and contextualization within the full report, rather than through selective data presentation. The ultimate goal is to provide actionable insights that are grounded in accurate data, thereby fostering trust and enabling sound decision-making. Question 13. Research into the effectiveness of a new marketing campaign has yielded results that do not support the initial hypothesis of significant improvement. A key stakeholder, who championed the campaign, has requested that the analysis be rerun with a specific subset of the data that they believe will demonstrate success. As the data analyst, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Agree to rerun the analysis on the specified subset of data, but clearly state in the report that this analysis was conducted at the stakeholder's request and may not represent the overall campaign performance. Option B. Conduct the analysis using only the specified subset of data, as requested by the stakeholder, to demonstrate the campaign's perceived success. Option C. Rerun the analysis on the entire dataset, but selectively highlight only the data points that show a positive trend, while downplaying or omitting any data that indicates a negative or neutral outcome. Option D. Politely decline the stakeholder's request to rerun the analysis on a specific subset of data, explaining that the original, comprehensive analysis is the most objective representation of the campaign's performance, and offering to explore alternative explanations for the observed results. The correct answer is B. Conduct the analysis using only the specified subset of data, as requested by the stakeholder, to demonstrate the campaign's perceived success. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a stakeholder's desire for a specific outcome and the ethical obligation to conduct objective research. The challenge lies in maintaining research integrity and adhering to the principles of unbiased data analysis, which are fundamental to the credibility of any statistical findings. The stakeholder's influence, if not managed appropriately, could lead to misrepresentation of data, potentially impacting decision-making and professional reputation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the research process and the objective interpretation of data. This aligns with the core principles of ethical research and professional conduct, ensuring that findings are not skewed to satisfy external pressures. By focusing on the data and employing appropriate statistical methods, the researcher upholds their responsibility to provide accurate and unbiased insights, which is a cornerstone of professional competence and trustworthiness in data analysis. An incorrect approach that involves manipulating the analysis to align with the stakeholder's preconceived notions constitutes a significant ethical failure. This directly violates the principle of research objectivity and can lead to misleading conclusions. Such actions undermine the credibility of the researcher and the organization they represent, potentially leading to poor business decisions based on flawed data. Furthermore, it breaches professional standards that demand honesty and transparency in reporting findings. Another incorrect approach, which involves presenting the data without any interpretation or context, fails to fulfill the professional responsibility of a data analyst. While it avoids overt manipulation, it neglects the crucial step of translating raw data into actionable insights. This can be seen as a dereliction of duty, as stakeholders rely on analysts not just to process data, but to help them understand its implications. This passive approach, while seemingly neutral, can still be professionally detrimental if it leads to inaction or missed opportunities due to a lack of clear guidance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the research objectives, the ethical guidelines governing data analysis, and the specific requirements of the stakeholder. When faced with pressure to alter findings, a professional should first seek to understand the stakeholder's underlying concerns and the rationale behind their desired outcome. If the stakeholders request conflicts with ethical research practices, the professional must clearly and respectfully communicate the limitations and ethical boundaries. This involves explaining why certain analyses are inappropriate or why the data does not support their desired conclusion, while offering alternative, ethically sound approaches to explore the underlying issues. The focus should always be on maintaining transparency, objectivity, and the integrity of the research process. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a flagged anomaly in the recent sales data, indicating a potential deviation from expected patterns. A data analyst has observed this alert. Option A. The data analyst should immediately report the anomaly to senior management, assuming it represents a significant data integrity issue that requires urgent attention. Option B. The data analyst should assume the anomaly is due to a known system bug and proceed with data correction without verifying the specific cause. Option C. The data analyst should first review the raw sales data and the specific parameters that triggered the alert to understand the nature and potential impact of the deviation before consulting any policies. Option D. The data analyst should ignore the alert, as monitoring systems can sometimes generate false positives, and it is unlikely to be a critical issue without further investigation. The correct answer is C. The data analyst should first review the raw sales data and the specific parameters that triggered the alert to understand the nature and potential impact of the deviation before consulting any policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a data monitoring system, designed to ensure data integrity and compliance, flags a potential deviation. The challenge lies in interpreting the system's output and determining the appropriate course of action, without causing undue alarm or overlooking a genuine issue. The professional must balance the need for vigilance with the risk of false positives, all while adhering to established data governance protocols. The stakeholder perspective is crucial here, as the interpretation and subsequent actions will impact various parties, including data analysts, project managers, and potentially regulatory bodies if the deviation is significant. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based investigation. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing accuracy and due diligence. Specifically, it requires the professional to first verify the flagged anomaly by examining the raw data and the system's logic. This step is critical for understanding the nature and potential impact of the deviation. If the anomaly is confirmed, the next step is to consult the relevant data governance policies and procedures. These policies, established under the framework of data management best practices and potentially industry-specific regulations, though not explicitly stated for this exam, the principle applies, dictate how such deviations should be documented, reported, and remediated. This methodical approach ensures that actions are not taken impulsively, but are grounded in established protocols, minimizing the risk of errors and maintaining the integrity of the data and the reporting process. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the system's alert is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Data monitoring systems are implemented to detect potential issues that could compromise data quality, lead to incorrect conclusions, or violate compliance requirements. Failure to investigate a flagged anomaly suggests negligence and a disregard for established data governance. This could lead to the perpetuation of errors, misinformed decision-making, and potential breaches of data integrity standards. Immediately escalating the issue without initial verification is also professionally unsound. While vigilance is important, premature escalation based on unconfirmed system alerts can lead to unnecessary disruption, wasted resources, and a loss of credibility for the monitoring system and the professional. It bypasses the critical step of understanding the context and severity of the anomaly, potentially creating a false alarm that erodes trust in the system. This approach lacks the professional judgment required to differentiate between minor system quirks and genuine data integrity concerns. Making assumptions about the cause of the anomaly without examining the data is another failure. Data analysis and monitoring require an objective, evidence-based approach. Jumping to conclusions without reviewing the underlying data means that any subsequent actions will be based on speculation rather than fact. This can lead to incorrect remediation efforts, further data corruption, and a failure to address the actual root cause of the problem, thereby violating principles of sound data management and professional responsibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, they must understand the purpose and limitations of the monitoring system. Second, they should always prioritize verification of any flagged anomaly by directly examining the relevant data and system logs. Third, they must consult and adhere to established organizational policies and procedures for data, anomaly detection, and resolution. Fourth, if an anomaly is confirmed and falls outside routine parameters, a clear and documented reporting and escalation pathway should be followed. Finally, professionals should maintain a critical yet objective perspective, ensuring that their actions are driven by evidence and a commitment to data integrity and compliance. Question 15. Which approach would be most ethically sound when a researcher using IBM SPSS statistics identifies a statistically significant correlation in a dataset that, if presented without careful aggregation, could potentially allow for the identification of a small number of participants due to unique characteristics within the sample? Option A. Publish the findings with detailed descriptive statistics and a disclaimer acknowledging the potential for identification, emphasizing the scientific merit of the discovery. Option B. Present the findings in a way that highlights the correlation but omits specific demographic or contextual details that could aid in identification, focusing on the broader implications of the research. Option C. Seek explicit consent from each participant for the potential, albeit unlikely, identification of their data in the published results, explaining the statistical significance. Option D. Aggressively anonymize the data by removing or altering key variables that contribute to the potential identification, even if it slightly weakens the precision of the findings. The correct answer is A. Publish the findings with detailed descriptive statistics and a disclaimer acknowledging the potential for identification, emphasizing the scientific merit of the discovery. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between a researcher's desire to publish findings and the ethical obligation to protect the privacy of individuals whose data was used. The researcher has access to sensitive information through IBM SPSS statistics, and the temptation to present aggregated data in a way that could inadvertently identify participants, especially in a small or unique sample, is a significant ethical hurdle. Careful judgment is required to balance the pursuit of knowledge with the fundamental duty of confidentiality. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data anonymization and participant confidentiality above all else. By ensuring that no individual can be identified from the published results, the researcher upholds the ethical principles of research integrity and respects the trust placed in them by the participants. This aligns with general ethical guidelines for research, which emphasize minimizing harm and protecting vulnerable populations. The use of IBM SPSS statistics, while powerful for analysis, necessitates a responsible approach to data handling and reporting to prevent unintended disclosure. An incorrect approach that involves publishing findings without adequate anonymization fails to uphold the principle of confidentiality. This can lead to reputational damage for the researcher and the institution, and more importantly, can cause distress or harm to the individuals whose privacy is violated. Such a failure constitutes a breach of ethical research conduct and may also contravene specific data protection regulations, depending on the jurisdiction and the nature of the data. Another incorrect approach, which involves withholding potentially valuable research findings solely due to minor, easily rectifiable risks of identification, might be seen as overly cautious and could hinder the advancement of knowledge. However, in the context of ethical dilemmas, erring on the side of caution to protect participant privacy is generally preferred over risking their confidentiality. The professional reasoning process should involve a thorough risk assessment of potential identification, consultation with ethics review boards or senior colleagues, and the implementation of robust anonymization techniques before any data is disseminated. Question 16. The review process indicates that a recent analysis using IBM SPSS statistics identified a statistically significant relationship between two variables. However, the magnitude of this relationship is very small, suggesting a minimal practical impact. Which of the following approaches best reflects professional best practice in reporting these findings? Option A. Report the finding as a major breakthrough, implying a strong causal link and significant real-world consequences due to the statistical significance alone. Option B. Report the finding, clearly stating that while statistically significant, the effect size is small and its practical implications are likely minimal, recommending further investigation into other factors. Option C. Report the finding, emphasizing its statistical significance and the low p-value, without further commentary on its practical implications. Option D. Omit the finding from the report entirely, as its practical insignificance makes it unworthy of mention, despite its statistical significance. The correct answer is C. Report the finding, emphasizing its statistical significance and the low p-value, without further commentary on its practical implications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data interpretation and reporting within the context of IBM SPSS statistics. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the insights derived from statistical analysis are presented accurately and ethically, avoiding misrepresentation or oversimplification that could lead to flawed decision-making. The professional must navigate the nuances of statistical significance versus practical significance and understand the limitations of the chosen statistical methods. Careful judgment is required to balance the need for clear communication with the imperative of statistical integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes the importance of contextualizing statistical findings. It acknowledges that a statistically significant result, e.g., a low p-value, does not automatically translate to a meaningful or actionable outcome in a real-world business context. Best professional practice dictates that the analyst should consider the magnitude of the effect, the sample size, and the practical implications of the findings. This aligns with ethical guidelines that promote transparency and prevent misleading interpretations. By discussing both statistical significance and practical implications, the analyst provides a more complete and responsible picture, enabling stakeholders to make informed decisions based on a realistic understanding of the data. This approach upholds the principle of providing accurate and unbiased information. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on statistical significance, ignoring the practical implications. This is professionally unacceptable because it can lead to decisions based on trivial findings that have no real-world impact. It represents a failure to exercise due diligence in interpreting data and can be seen as a form of misrepresentation by omission, as it hides the lack of practical relevance. Another incorrect approach might overstate the certainty of the findings, implying that the statistical model perfectly predicts future outcomes. This is ethically problematic as it creates a false sense of security and can lead to poor strategic planning. It fails to acknowledge the inherent uncertainty in statistical modeling and the potential for variability. A third incorrect approach could involve selectively reporting only the statistically significant findings while omitting those that are not, even if they are theoretically important or suggest alternative explanations. This is a clear ethical breach, as it distorts the overall picture and can be used to support a predetermined conclusion, undermining the objectivity of the analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the research question and the practical context of the analysis. 2. Selecting appropriate statistical methods in IBM SPSS statistics and understanding their assumptions and limitations. 3. Interpreting statistical outputs not just in terms of significance, but also in terms of effect size and practical relevance. 4. Communicating findings clearly and comprehensively, highlighting both strengths and limitations. 5. Avoiding overgeneralization or definitive statements where uncertainty exists. 6. Being prepared to explain the rationale behind interpretations and to defend the analytical process. Question 17. The analysis reveals that a customer satisfaction survey, processed using IBM SPSS statistics, indicates a statistically significant negative correlation between the perceived responsiveness of customer service representatives and overall customer loyalty scores. However, the survey also shows a slight, non-statistically significant positive trend between the number of support tickets logged and customer satisfaction. When presenting these findings to senior management, which approach best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for financial advisory services? Option A. Report the statistically significant negative correlation and the non-significant positive trend, but include anecdotal evidence from customer feedback that contradicts the statistical findings, suggesting that the survey data may not be representative of the true customer experience. Option B. Emphasize the strong negative correlation between responsiveness and loyalty, recommending immediate, significant investment in customer service training and performance metrics, while downplaying the non-significant positive trend regarding support tickets as likely noise. Option C. Focus solely on the non-statistically significant positive trend, suggesting that increased support ticket volume might be a proxy for customer engagement, and recommend strategies to encourage more ticket submissions, while omitting the statistically significant negative correlation due to its potential to create alarm. Option D. Present both findings objectively, highlighting the statistically significant negative correlation as a key area for improvement and the non-significant positive trend as an area requiring further investigation or a different analytical approach, ensuring all interpretations are grounded in statistical significance and data limitations. The correct answer is B. Emphasize the strong negative correlation between responsiveness and loyalty, recommending immediate, significant investment in customer service training and performance metrics, while downplaying the non-significant positive trend regarding support tickets as likely noise. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a financial advisor is tasked with interpreting and presenting the results of a customer satisfaction survey conducted using IBM SPSS statistics. The challenge lies in ensuring that the interpretation and subsequent recommendations are not only statistically sound, but also comply with the regulatory framework governing financial advice and data handling. Specifically, the advisor must avoid making unsubstantiated claims or recommendations that could mislead clients or violate data privacy principles. The correct approach involves a nuanced interpretation of the SPSS output, focusing on statistically significant findings and their practical implications for client service improvement, while strictly adhering to data privacy regulations. This means presenting findings objectively, without exaggeration, and ensuring that any recommendations are directly supported by the data and align with ethical standards of financial advice. The advisor must also be mindful of the limitations of the data and the statistical methods used, communicating these clearly to stakeholders. This represents best professional practice because it prioritizes accuracy, transparency, and client well-being, which are cornerstones of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct in the financial services industry. It demonstrates a commitment to providing advice based on evidence and within the bounds of professional responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to overstate the significance of minor findings or to draw conclusions that are not statistically supported by the SPSS output. This could lead to misinformed decisions by management or clients, potentially resulting in financial losses or reputational damage. Such an approach would also fail to uphold the duty of care owed to clients and could breach regulations related to the accuracy and integrity of financial advice. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose personally identifiable information or aggregated data in a way that could inadvertently reveal individual customer responses, even if the intention is to illustrate a point. This would constitute a serious breach of data privacy regulations and ethical obligations, leading to severe penalties and loss of trust. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the statistical significance levels provided by SPSS and instead focus on anecdotal evidence or personal biases when interpreting the results. This undermines the scientific rigor of the analysis and can lead to flawed recommendations that do not address the actual issues identified in the survey, thereby failing to meet professional standards and potentially violating regulatory requirements for evidence-based decision-making. The professional reasoning process in such situations should involve a systematic review of the SPSS output, cross-referencing findings with established statistical principles and regulatory guidelines. It requires a critical evaluation of the data's limitations, a clear understanding of the ethical implications of any interpretation or recommendation, and a commitment to transparent communication with all relevant parties. Professionals must always ask, is this interpretation supported by the data? Is it compliant with all relevant regulations? Does it serve the best interests of the client and the organization? Question 18. Strategic planning requires a robust understanding of the target market. When analyzing customer demographics using IBM SPSS statistics, which sampling approach would best ensure that the resulting insights are generalizable to the entire customer base, thereby minimizing bias and supporting accurate strategic decisions. Option A. Choosing customers who fit a predefined profile based on initial assumptions about the market. Option B. Surveying customers who have recently made a purchase, as they are likely to be more engaged. Option C. Selecting customers who are most easily accessible for survey completion. Option D. Randomly selecting customers from a comprehensive customer database, ensuring each customer has an equal probability of inclusion. The correct answer is C. Selecting customers who are most easily accessible for survey completion. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in data analysis where the integrity and reliability of the findings are paramount. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen method for selecting a sample accurately reflects the population of interest, thereby leading to valid conclusions. Misinterpreting or misapplying sampling techniques can lead to biased results, inaccurate reporting, and ultimately, flawed strategic decisions based on that data. Careful judgment is required to select a method that minimizes bias and maximizes the representativeness of the sample. The correct approach, which involves using a systematic random sampling method where each member of the population has an equal and known chance of selection, represents best professional practice because it adheres to fundamental statistical principles for achieving a representative sample. This method is designed to avoid selection bias and allows for the generalization of findings to the broader population with a quantifiable degree of confidence. In the context of IBM SPSS Statistics Level 1, understanding and correctly applying such sampling techniques is crucial for producing reliable analytical outputs that can inform strategic planning. An incorrect approach that relies on convenience sampling, where individuals are selected based on their easy availability, fails to meet the standards of best professional practice. This method is inherently biased as it does not ensure that every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected, leading to a sample that is unlikely to be representative. This can result in skewed data and misleading conclusions, which is a significant ethical failure as it compromises the integrity of the analysis and can lead to detrimental strategic decisions. Another incorrect approach, such as purposive sampling without clear, objective criteria, also introduces bias. While sometimes used for specific qualitative research, for quantitative analysis aiming for generalizability, it lacks the rigor of random selection and can lead to subjective interpretations and unrepresentative findings, again posing an ethical concern regarding the validity of the data. A third incorrect approach, involving haphazard sampling, is essentially random sampling without a defined system, which can still lead to unconscious bias in selection and is not a statistically sound method for ensuring representativeness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes the research objectives and the need for a representative sample. This involves understanding the characteristics of the target population, identifying potential sources of bias, and selecting a sampling method that systematically minimizes these biases. When using statistical software like IBM SPSS Statistics, it is essential to understand the underlying principles of the sampling techniques available and to apply them judiciously, ensuring that the chosen method aligns with the goals of the analysis and the principles of sound statistical practice. Question 19. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new data analysis software offers significant potential cost savings in processing time. However, the organization must decide on the best approach to integrate this new tool, considering its potential impact on data security and regulatory compliance. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach? Option A. Rely on vendor assurances regarding the software's security and compliance features without conducting independent verification or internal risk analysis. Option B. Implement the new software on a limited pilot basis, focusing solely on its performance metrics and cost-effectiveness, with minimal consideration for broader risk implications. Option C. Proceed with the immediate implementation of the new software to realize cost savings, assuming that existing security protocols are sufficient and any compliance issues can be addressed reactively. Option D. Prioritize a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential data security vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and operational disruptions associated with the new software, and develop mitigation strategies before full implementation. The correct answer is D. Prioritize a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies potential data security vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and operational disruptions associated with the new software, and develop mitigation strategies before full implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new data analysis tool against its associated risks, all within the context of regulatory compliance and ethical data handling. The challenge lies in moving beyond a purely financial cost-benefit calculation to incorporate qualitative risks and the potential impact on data integrity and user privacy. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment that goes beyond immediate financial considerations. It acknowledges that the implementation of new technology, even with apparent cost savings, can introduce unforeseen risks such as data breaches, compliance violations, or operational disruptions. By systematically identifying, analyzing, and evaluating these risks, and then developing mitigation strategies, the organization demonstrates a commitment to responsible data management and adherence to relevant regulations, such as those governing data privacy and security. This proactive stance minimizes potential harm to individuals and the organization itself. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate cost savings, without a thorough risk assessment, fails to meet regulatory and ethical standards. Such an approach could lead to significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust if data security is compromised or privacy regulations are violated. For instance, neglecting to assess the security vulnerabilities of a new tool could result in a data breach, directly contravening data protection laws. Similarly, an approach that overlooks the potential for bias in the tool's algorithms, without a plan to mitigate it, could lead to discriminatory outcomes, violating ethical principles and potentially specific anti-discrimination regulations. Another incorrect approach might be to implement the tool without adequate training or oversight, increasing the likelihood of errors and misuse, which could have regulatory implications depending on the nature of the data being analyzed. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives and scope of the analysis. This should be followed by a thorough risk identification process, considering technical, operational, legal, and ethical dimensions. Each identified risk should then be analyzed for its likelihood and potential impact. Based on this analysis, appropriate mitigation strategies should be developed and prioritized. Finally, the decision should be made by weighing the residual risks against the potential benefits, ensuring that the chosen path is not only cost-effective, but also compliant, ethical, and sustainable. Question 20. During the evaluation of a complex data analysis project in IBM SPSS statistics, a data analyst notices that the processing time for a particular routine is significantly longer than anticipated, impacting project deadlines. The analyst needs to improve the efficiency of this process. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach to optimizing this workflow? Option A. Apply a series of random syntax modifications and observe if any changes lead to a noticeable speed increase without formal testing or documentation. Option B. Immediately replace the current syntax with a collection of recently published advanced SPSS techniques found on an online forum, assuming they will inherently be more efficient. Option C. Focus solely on reducing the number of variables or cases in the dataset to speed up processing, without considering the analytical implications of such reductions. Option D. Conduct a detailed review of the existing syntax and data manipulation, steps to identify specific areas of inefficiency, such as redundant operations or suboptimal procedure choices, and then implement targeted, tested modifications. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed review of the existing syntax and data manipulation, steps to identify specific areas of inefficiency, such as redundant operations or suboptimal procedure choices, and then implement targeted, tested modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data analysis where the efficiency of a process directly impacts the timely and accurate delivery of insights. The professional is tasked with optimizing a data processing workflow within IBM SPSS statistics. The challenge lies in balancing the need for speed and resource utilization with the imperative to maintain data integrity and adhere to any implicit or explicit guidelines regarding analytical process efficiency. Misjudging the optimization strategy could lead to wasted computational resources, prolonged analysis times, or even introduce subtle errors if not carefully considered. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the existing workflow to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement. This includes evaluating the sequence of operations, the efficiency of statistical procedures used, and the potential for parallel processing or more streamlined data manipulation techniques within SPSS. Best professional practice dictates a methodical, evidence-based approach to optimization, ensuring that changes are tested and validated. This aligns with the general principles of good data management and analytical practice, which emphasize accuracy, efficiency, and reproducibility. While specific regulations for process optimization within SPSS are not typically codified in the same way as financial regulations, the underlying ethical and professional standards demand that analyses be conducted in a manner that is both reliable and resource-conscious. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a broad, untested change across the entire workflow without prior analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It risks introducing unforeseen errors or inefficiencies, compromising the integrity of the results. This approach lacks the due diligence required for professional data analysis. Randomly applying new syntax or features without understanding their impact on the existing process is also professionally unacceptable. It demonstrates a lack of systematic problem solving and could lead to unintended consequences, such as data corruption or incorrect statistical outputs. Furthermore, prioritizing speed over accuracy or validation is a direct violation of professional ethics, as it can lead to flawed conclusions and misinformed decisions. Relying solely on external, unverified advice without critical evaluation of its applicability to the specific SPSS environment and dataset is another failure. This bypasses the necessary steps of understanding the context and potential limitations of the suggested optimization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach process optimization by first thoroughly understanding the current workflow and its objectives. This involves documenting existing steps, identifying performance metrics, and pinpointing specific areas of concern. Next, potential optimization strategies should be researched and evaluated for their suitability and potential impact. This might involve consulting SPSS documentation, reputable analytical resources, or seeking advice from experienced colleagues, but always with a critical eye. Proposed changes should then be implemented incrementally and rigorously tested on a subset of data or in a controlled environment before full deployment. This iterative process of analysis, implementation, and validation ensures that optimizations are effective, do not compromise data integrity, and align with professional standards of accuracy and efficiency.